So today I want to talk about something that is a really common problem in architecture, and that is the fact that people don't stay motivated. This affects students and it affects professionals as well. And that's the reason why you hear so many people complain about the field. It's really nothing else. Like people talk about the lack of money, people talk about the fact that they're not happy at work, but the root of all this is actually the fact that they're not motivated. And the main reason why people are not motivated in architecture is because architecture is a really difficult career. And what I mean by that is that what you learn in school is not really all applicable in the profession, right? So students will go into the field thinking that they know so much because they just spent so much time in school and gave so much effort. And then what ends up happening is that they realize they don't know anything. They know software, but that's it. There's nothing else that they know that they feel can help them in the career. So they start asking other professionals that are around. This is if they do have these resources. A lot of times students will join small firms that don't have resources. They don't have mentorship that can help them. And so they really don't have anywhere to turn to. And architecture is not something that you can easily Google answers to, not answers that are required in the profession. So a lot of times what will happen is a firm will hire a student, and then that student will start working in the project, and they're lost immediately because it's not like in school where you start a project from scratch. In the field, most of the time what happens is that there's an ongoing project. Sometimes it's a project that's from years ago, right? And nobody even remembers where this project left off. So now the student has to pick this project up, and they might not know what details are or how to properly detail, or they might be working on something that has to do with specs. They don't know what that is. Maybe they have to go through emails and see what the engineers said about something in the project, and they're confused. So they have a million questions, and these questions you cannot Google. The reason why is because every building, right, has its own set of problems. And every building is located in a different place, which has different needs because of different clients and so many things, right? So you can't just Google. And that causes the student to feel, or not the student at this point, but the junior architect, right, the junior designer, to feel like they just don't know what's going on and they don't know where to turn to. And it causes a shock. It really does cause a shock. And so very easily, this person might not know where to turn to, what to do next. And this causes a lack of motivation, right? On the same level, you have someone who's been doing architecture for a few years, who's been probably their second, third firm. Maybe they've been with this one firm and they kind of feel comfortable already. They more or less know what's going on. But again, there's still that issue of so many questions, and it's not always easy to get the answers. There's really no good reference out there that can answer all your questions in a way that can help you on the projects that you're on. So what happens in this case is this person might want to go to the next level, right? They want a promotion, or maybe they want more tasks, right? They want to become a project manager. But a lot of times firms, because they don't really have the resources all the time to grow and expand the way that they want to, they can't just offer everybody the promotions that they want. So it's kind of like a slow process, right? So naturally, the best way to continue growing and expanding would be to look for other jobs. But this is very scary because a lot of times you don't know what you're getting into. See, most of the time, I see people have this issue where the firm that they're at, the people that are running the firm, right? Not necessarily the owners, but sometimes the managers, they don't really have a good way to put these people on a specific timeline that'll help them get to where they want to get to, right? Because everybody's just going crazy. There's deadlines that are happening. These clients are not paying enough. And so everything's just like rush, 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 do. There's really not time to break things apart and really learn. So therefore, it's a struggle. And so you, as a person in this position, you don't really know what to do. Do you leave the firm that you're at? Do you stay here and just continue to, fight through it, and hopefully you'll get that promotion that you'll get one day? And so you feel like you're at a standstill. And this standstill, right, it makes you feel like you're just not motivated, right? You're not learning. You're not doing anything new. The thing is that we as professionals, we want to continue growing and evolving. And that's the cool thing about architecture. That's something that school promises you. Uh, and it's that ability to continue learning, continue doing new things, right? It's always fresh. But when you get to the field, it's not always that way. And so you lose motivation. So what do you do, right? What do you do in a case where you're brand new, you're fresh, and you're not motivated anymore? Does that mean that architecture is not for you? Not necessarily. I always believe that if you enjoy the overall idea of what architecture is, and that's not the architecture that they teach in school. It's not this, you're going to be a one-man show designing skyscrapers. It's not that, right? It's not that. If you have an overall idea of what the concept of architecture is, and you enjoy that, right? And you're new, I promise you it's going to get better. So stick with it. Every time that you start a new project, every time that you start a new firm, doesn't matter how much experience you are, there's always going to be kind of like this feeling of going against the grain where you're really moving slowly. You're taking so much time to do things, to do certain tasks. You're really not understanding the concept too well. Maybe you can't understand the plan. There's so many issues that arise for new and old alike. So if you are new, my advice is just to stick with it. Now, if you are someone who's older, you've been in the career for a long time, and you're just not feeling motivated, well, you got to ask yourself why. You see, there's been a few times in my career that I have felt unmotivated. The first time was somewhere around the 3 or 4 year mark in my architecture firm, where I just felt like I wasn't motivated anymore. And this is because the projects that I was working on, they were very boring, right? I didn't enjoy them at all. And I say boring because it was boring to me. Doesn't mean that there are boring projects, right? For example, if you're working in healthcare, I consider that boring, but maybe you don't. And there's a lot of architects that don't. It's just a whole different monster, the healthcare side of architecture. But I found projects like that boring, right? And so I had an option. Do I stay here and try to get new jobs, right? Or do I leave and look for a firm that offers projects that I find more fun? I actually ended up leaving, but if you're in this position, you don't have to leave. You can stay at the firm, and I always advise people to talk to the owners, right? Talk to their project managers, talk to the lead designers, see if perhaps you can be put on other projects. And if your firm is like this one-sided firm, you could try talking about maybe getting new projects. Now, this isn't always easy for small firms, and it's not really easy for firms that are set in their ways. But I think that communication goes a long way. And I think it's very important for you to express what your interests are and what your needs are as a designer, right? As an architect. So if you're ever in that position like I was, right? You're at the beginning of your career and you just feel like you're not enjoying the projects that you're on, and therefore you're losing motivation, then my advice is to first communicate with your firm. Let them know exactly what your needs are. Maybe you don't know what your needs are. This is something that's happened to me multiple times. You get stuck and you're like, well, maybe architecture isn't for me. Communicate, talk. If your firm has mentors, right, or mentor quality, they're going to guide you through it because everybody's been through this. Everybody in this career has been through this. So they're going to talk to you and they're going to help you. If they seem to brush you off or not treat you seriously or kind of shut you up and tell you to go back to your seat, this is probably not the firm for you. I don't think you should leave immediately. You should probably give it a little bit more time, but be on the lookout for new opportunities. Now, there was another time where after many years in this career that I felt unmotivated again, right? So I had started a new firm and I was enjoying it. I was enjoying the projects, but I just felt like I wasn't growing. So I was kind of a term that they use in this field is pigeonholed, right? And I was pigeonholed to the same type of project. And they kept on throwing me at end of life projects. What I mean by that is projects that are pretty much in their CD phase or construction documents. There's no design going. There's really no conversation about what kind of changes are happening in the building in terms of aesthetics. It's all what they call value engineering, right? So they're taking projects and they're making them cheaper at this point because it's almost time to construct this building. So I really didn't like this phase, right? The thing that I do like about this phase is the detailing. I like working on detailing. I like understanding how a building is made up. at that level. But if that's all you're doing, it gets old if that's not what you like, because I've always been like, after I graduated college, I kind of like, I got this interest, this entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to be something bigger than I ever thought I could be. And so, me feeling like I was just doing the same thing over and over and over and not really learning anything, it really felt like I had no impact in this project. And so, therefore, I started to feel really, really unmotivated. And so, many people feel this way too. I'm not the only one. I'm telling you, everybody goes through this, like an ebb and flow that you go through. So, what I did was that I had multiple conversations with one of the partners, multiple conversations. And they really tried to help me. They put me on new projects, but it's just not easy. Sometimes it's not easy. So, if I would have been more patient, I could have probably had things go my way. But at this point, I was already kind of flirting with the idea of owning my own business. And not only that, I wanted to own a business in architecture that wasn't your traditional firm where you find clients and do designs. I wanted to do something different. I didn't know what that was. And I'm still not 100% sure, to be honest with you. But I just knew that it was something different. And I felt that the firm that I was in, which was already established, they weren't going to help me get to there. So I just felt like we weren't a good match for each other. It's like a relationship, it is a relationship. And therefore, I decided, like, I think I need to do things on my own. And that's when I started thinking about the possibility of being a freelancer, right? And so I started kind of doing work on the side. And so that sparked my interest again, because now I had a whole new responsibility, which was finding my own clients. I had to find my own clients. I had to communicate with them to see what they wanted. And at first it was very dumb little things, like some renderings here and there and, just dumb things overall. But it felt very rewarding. So my motivation, it got like kicked to fifth gear, right? Because all of a sudden I had discovered like the possibility of having an impact in my future and in the career. So that goes to show you that if you're in a scenario like I was at that point, you just have to be honest with yourself and ask yourself what it is that you want. The tricky part is that we don't always know what we want. We know we want something different, but we don't know what it is. So communicate your ideas, right? Talk to coworkers. I used to talk to my coworkers a lot during my lunch breaks and just kind of like pitch my ideas to them, have them tell me what their ideas were, what their future was. And, that in itself was really motivating. And eventually I left that firm. And I think it was a great resource. But the point is that I had to leave that firm to, at that moment, grab motivation again. And then finally, once I started working on my own, right, as a freelancer, as I mentioned, doing all these dumb little projects, I started to lose a little bit of motivation. I need to explain to you that the first time in all of this video that I've mentioned that I lost motivation, I want to show you kind of like what that graph looked like, right? So I was like, in school, you're like really motivated. And then I fell down somewhere here. And then the next time that I lost motivation here. And then the third time when I was finally freelancing and working on my own, right? I was here, I lost motivation here. So as you can see, I never got to the point where I was worse off. So that is a good sign that the choices that you're making are good. They're good choices. And if you ever feel like your motivation dips more, that's an indicator that you've done something wrong, which is not always a step back, right? Sometimes you make a move and it doesn't turn out the way that you wanted. That doesn't mean that you took a step back. A lot of times it's a step kind of sideways, right? Or like at an angle. So always keep that in mind. If you lost motivation and you made a change and then all of a sudden you're motivated again, but then now you felt worse than before, don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged by that. And so now, if you're someone like me, right, you're at this level where you've finally made all the possible choices that you think you could make, but you're still not motivated. And now you're possibly thinking about, well, what do I do now? I think it's time to think about architecture differently. You see, I mentioned the possibility of working or owning a firm that is not your traditional architecture firm, right? What does that mean? That means that you have to think outside the box. And this is a cliche that's always mentioned that makes everything so much more complicated than it has to be, because now you have to think of it as a box and you have to step outside of it. But what does that mean? Well, what I encourage you to do is think about what you enjoy, right? Or maybe consider some hobbies that could affect your career in a positive way. So I'll give you some examples. Real estate, right? Development. That you don't have to quit architecture to get into real estate or development. They kind of go hand in hand. Remodeling, right? And software, right? Tech. These are things that are basically, they surround architecture. They're not directly related to architecture, but they work hand in hand. And so if you're at a point where you don't feel, you're not motivated anymore, right? Then perhaps you could look into some of these other avenues as ideas to complement your work, or how your knowledge could complement these things as you learn them. And the final point here is that you need a hobby. You need a hobby that is going to complement your work. So I mentioned tech, for example. There's a lot of things going on with AI right now. So perhaps it's time to start learning some code, right? Perhaps it's time to start communicating with AI and seeing what kind of cool things you can do to work architecture and AI together. This is just an example. Another example is real estate, as I mentioned. Perhaps you don't have the money to develop your own piece of land, and that's fine. But at least you having that idea of wanting to do that, now you have a starting point where you're at now, and you have a goal. And that's the whole idea behind motivation. It's knowing where you're at and knowing where you want to be, and continue moving along. Even if you're not headed in that direction perfectly, it's the idea that you continue to move and take steps toward that goal. So before I cut this video, I mentioned real estate and development. We don't all have money to develop, but that does not mean we can't learn about development. That doesn't mean that we can't work with developers. So if this is your path, which at this moment it's not mine, but if it were my path, I'd probably start trying to network with developers and try to see if they need anything from me, right? Do they need renders from me? Do they need diagrams, right? Do they need maybe a whole design? Because believe it or not, if you're not a licensed architect, you could still design, right? So maybe you can create some really cool renderings for them that they could use in their marketing. And the point is that if you are not motivated at this moment in time, it's not the end of the world. It really isn't. You just have to think a little bit, right? And you have to put effort, and you have to do things on the side to complement everything that you're doing, and really, turn that flame on again, which is passion, right? The passion that got you here in the first place. So think about that, and let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, and I'll answer them.